Drinks, food, art, fun. This is Hops and Spirits Kentucky.
I hope you enjoyed our latest road trip stop last week as we headed to Myrtle Beach and Crooked Hammock Brewing. It's been fun talking to all these places, just slightly or maybe a little further beyond the borders here in the Commonwealth, but all places that I think we Kentuckians might be visiting at some point or would like to visit. Got a great episode for you this week as we talk with Locust Grove, but first, what's pouring, some news and notes around Kentucky. First up, a new food truck is hitting the scene in Lexington. Brian Bear, co-owner of the Bear and the Butcher, shared that Bear's Chicken Shack will soon be on the streets. Foodies can expect fried chicken, waffle fries, homemade biscuits, and milkshake. A staple Louisville spot is expanding into NuLu. Wick's Pizza plans to open this fall at 811 East Market Street, next door to the Taj Bar, and is keeping things very simple. Whole and by the slice pizza and beer will be the only items on the menu at this spot. The inaugural NuLu Summer Festival debuts Saturday, July 22nd. The free event will take place along the main stretch of East Market Street, and there will be live music, food, drinks, and family-friendly activities. NuLu.org/summer for more information. The Summer Beer Fest at the Frazier is set for Saturday, July 29th, with more than 200 beers on tap in front of this history museum on Main Street in Louisville. The event is ticketed, and more details can be found at fraziermuseum.org. Graeter's Ice Cream is celebrating National Ice Cream Month with sweet reward member deals all month long because, as we know, when it's hot, it's time for a little ice cream to cool us down. All Graeter Sweet Rewards members will receive a $1.53 single dip sugar cone offer redeemable once throughout the month of July. Non-members can become Sweet Rewards members during the month and also receive the offer. And Graeter's annual coloring contest is back this month, where stores will reward completed entries with a free kids sugar cone. Guests can get a coloring sheet at participating shops, or they can download it online at graeters.com/coloring-contest. Rules and more details are on the coloring sheet itself. In northern Kentucky, Newport on the Levee's yet to open food hall has announced that 3 of its 4 spots have been filled. Galley on the Levee, a micro food hall and bar intended to open later this fall, will feature Los Tacos Hermanos, 4 Mile Pig, and Zaria Italian Eats upon opening. Its 4th space is still available at this time. And don't forget, it's Louisville Burger Week. Through Sunday, July 23rd, it features $7 burgers from 40-plus restaurants, and participants can download the mobile app to compete for prizes. And also, I hope you get to try those, and if you were in the Lexington area, I hope you got to try its Burger Week that just wrapped up here on Sunday. Up next, though, is our Q&A with Locust Grove in Louisville. Enjoy this trip into history.
Remember to check out Hops and Spirits on social media at Hops Spirits, all one word, on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also find Hops and Spirits on YouTube and at hopspirits.com.
Joining us here for our Q&A this week, they're from Locust Grove, which you'll learn is a pretty cool historical site here in Kentucky. We have Carol Ely, who's the executive director for Locust Grove, and Brian Cushing, a distillery consultant for the Farm Distillery Project out there. Welcome in.
Thank you.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
And I appreciate you all talking, because we do fun things on this show. We talk, whether it's boozy related, food related, art, fun. And I think this has a nice combination of all of that. And before we dive deep into that, I call this the Cliff Notes version, the Cliff Notes, just a little bit about yourselves, not too much, because I've got plenty of questions to ask.
Okay. Brian, you want to go first? Or?
Oh, sure. Well, I'm here because I'm the former program director from Historic Locust Grove and was involved with the Distillery Project and still work with them. I'm also the executive director of the Shelby County Historical Society, the owner of Victorian Productions, where we produce the Victorian Bar Room, both on YouTube and in person. And I have been an apprentice in an apple orchard for the past 3 years, aspiring to have my own.
And I'm the executive director of Historic Locust Grove. I've been here for almost 20 years now, which is really astonishing to me. But it's been a place that I can use my interest in public history. I have a PhD in American history, but my interest has always been in public history, in a place that really interacts with people and not just academia. So Locust Grove is going to great place to figure out new and better ways to talk about the past with the general public.
Well, and I was going to say, for both of you, obviously there's clearly a love of history there. Where does that love of history come from?
It's sort of in my DNA, I think. I've always been curious, and being able to ask questions about people's lives and their motivations and why they do what they do and what they know and what they don't know, it's just fascinating to me. I have always been intrigued by the idea that the people who lived in the past were like us in the sense that they don't know what comes next. You make decisions based on the information you have available to you and based on your personality, and you don't know how it's going to work out. And so that contingency aspect of history is really fascinating. Also, I think, like Brian, I like the stuff. I like the material remains. I like the buildings and the furniture and the objects that people created. So that's intriguing to me.
Yeah, I think for me it was similar. It's when history became something that was a living, breathing, tangible thing where real lives were lived. I think that's when it became inseparable from who I was. And so a lot of times when I think about history, I'm not always necessarily thinking in the context of headlines, but of just life in general. Which for the Distillery Project at Locust Grove, that was a part where I got to fully indulge that part of myself. Of really making something live and breathe again.
Well, and you both touched on this in multiple times. Locust Grove is a living, breathing historical site, but it's a little bit more than that. Can you explain what Locust Grove is?
Well, Locust Grove is literally 55 acres of land with 14 buildings on it in the east end of Louisville. It was a farm that was started in the 1790s by a man named William Cron, that most people have not heard of William Cron. He was distinguished in his day, but because he didn't have a political career, his name is not so widely known. But he was a surveyor who had served in the American Revolution under Washington, and he provided a home to his brother-in-law, General George Rogers Clark, and it's Clark's fame that saved Locust Grove. It continued to be a farm until the 1960s, and it was preserved then by the state and by Jefferson County, now owned by Louisville Metro, as a place initially to talk about Clark and his accomplishments. But since then, we have much broadened the story to talk about life in Louisville in that period, to talk about the Cron family, generations of the Cron family, and especially recently to talk about the enslaved community here, which was numbered at any one time probably about 40 individuals, but over time included at least 100 people. So that research is very exciting and ongoing. So we offer programs to the public, from weekend festival events like the Antiques Fair we just had, to our 18th Century Market Fair that comes up in the fall. We have lectures and concerts and daily tours and tours from the viewpoint of the enslaved population here as well. So there's a lot going on.
Well, and it's a cool thing to see. And for you, Carol, what is your kind of day-to-day role there, and kind of your role just in general there as the executive director?
A bit of everything, but lately, as our staff has grown, it's more about managing these great individuals that we have working here. Brian's leaving left a hole that we've just recently started to try to be able to fill. We'll never be able to replace Brian, but we have great staff. So when I first came, there were 3 people on the full-time staff. There's 8 now. So it's learning to delegate and just keeping a kind of a hand on the tiller to make sure that the course that we're steering is still accurate in history, exciting to the public, and tells the full range of stories. So some of that involves fundraising, some of that involves actual program development, but a lot of that is fortunately now done by some really great people we have on the staff.
And Brian, like she said, you're formally part of that staff, but kind of, I don't think you will ever go away from being part of that. But what was it like working there at Locust Grove and being able to do the things you did as program manager and working with the Farm Distillery Project and so many things?
Oh, a lot of ways it was a dream come true for me. I'd been involved with Locust Grove since I was 17 as a volunteer. I showed up in 1999, and I never thought that was going to take shape for me literally until the moment Carol offered me the first phase of that job. I'd been on a contract, and I literally thought it was just a debriefing session. It's like, well, that's done, moving on. And so that was a really great thing to be able to be a part of that, not just as a volunteer, but as a job. And so I think that my favorite things that I worked with, the core of my job was interpretive programming. And so I got to really dig in and figure out a lot of things that I was already into, as far as historic trades. I managed the first person interpreter program, which I also helped develop. And so it was really great to do that. There was a lot of extra stuff that has to be done, because there's a whole range of things that goes into running a historic site that you wouldn't think of. It has nothing to do with history at all. But the fact that that was the core of it for me was really a dream come true. Agonizing choice to move on, but like you say, I don't think I'll ever fully have moved on from there.
Well, and you're still in the world of history with all the different roles that you have that you kind of mentioned there at the start. And Carol, one of the big things that we were talking about today is the Farm Distillery Project, because this is Hops and Spirits Kentucky. The distillery can make spirits back in the day. Can you tell us how that kind of came to be there at the site?
Yeah, there was a discussion, I think, at a board meeting or after a board meeting. And at that time, Susan Riegler was on our board. She's a historian of bourbon, a great speaker and advocate for Kentucky's bourbon history. She served on our board, and she mentioned the concept of farm distilleries and the idea that the roots of the bourbon industry were in these small farm establishments. And so we kicked the idea around a little bit and we thought about it. We had a outbuilding that we weren't really using, a very small cabin that was probably a garden shed, originally log structure. We thought, maybe this would be a place we could demonstrate farm distilling. So we started to do more research on the history of distilling. And Brian, were you on the staff at that point already?
I was either on or coming on, because I remember starting to hear about it and not thinking it would happen anytime in the near future.
Well, yeah, it was a great concept, but what really made it take off was when Sally Van Winkle Campbell joined our board, and Sally took it on herself to raise the money, and she had a great idea to approach the families who involved in distilling historically, the Brown family and other representatives of some of the old families. So rather than going to the corporations, we went directly to the individuals, and she got a tremendous response. She helped us raise enough money to restore the building, to order a still made by Vendome along the lines of George Washington's stills. So we were able to craft a plan to create a farm distillery. Now, we were doing research at the same time, and we knew that William Cron's farm included orchards, included fields of grain, and was also a place that neighboring farmers could bring things to be processed at his mill. So with the mill, the grain, the orchards, he would absolutely been distilling. The distillery probably would have been near the mill, which is on land that is not now part of Locust Grove, although we know where it was. So the building that we've reconstructed is not where the distillery would have been. We know that, and we tell people that it would have been near a source of running water, which is we've had to pipe in water. It's a little Disneyland, but nonetheless, we did some research and we discovered that William Cron had purchased a still in 1808. So that added more evidence that we were correct in reconstructing a distillery. So at the same time, I guess Brian was joining the staff, and with his interest in historic trades and crafts, he seemed to be the perfect person to become our master distiller. And I guess Brian could probably take it from there in describing the process of learning about this.
Yeah, so that was, and I guess I can't really. Master distiller is flattering to me. I never really
master distiller.
Yeah, but no, that was really neat, because I mean, I knew obviously I appreciated whiskey. I knew what it was. I had a vague idea of the history of it, but I wasn't even somebody who really did distillery tours a lot, and so I was kind of really getting in on just the ground floor of that. And the advantage I think I had was I didn't have bad habits to break from from having been in an industrial modern distillery or something like that. And so I literally learned to make whiskey from Steve Bayshore at Mount Vernon. Melissa Alexander was a volunteer with us who was on that committee at the time, and she made contact with them. And lo and behold, Steve invited us out for a few days. So it was literally 3 days on the ground there at Mount Vernon, making whiskey, and that was the first time I'd ever made whiskey, and so that was my first impression of it, and that was great. And Steve has just been wonderful ever since, and he even came out for our opening of the Farm Distillery and spent the weekend with us. And from there was a couple other distilleries, Spirits of French Lick and Kentucky Artisan Distillery. No, not Kentucky Artisan, but they helped us out later. It was Wilderness Trail hosted us for training. So we got kind of a broad range of all that. And then beyond the still itself, for all of the gear and stuff that we needed, all the tools, we researched what that was. A lot of that, we got a good idea of that from Mount Vernon, since they were a distillery, different idea. They were actually an industrial operation for the day rather than just a farm operation. But we were able to get a good idea of what the tools were and really benefit from their research. And so we made a real effort to engage local craftsmen, historic tradesmen, most of which we knew from our 18th century market fair, to produce all that stuff. So it wasn't mass produced stuff. We had two different historic blacksmiths helped us out, Aubrey Williams and Mick Kane. Jay Henderson and Tracy Garland did all the pottery. Rudy McKinney did the woodwork. All these people from our community that we'd already known did this work just like it would have been done back then. Artisans from either from the farm or from that community.
Well, it's a cool story to hear and just kind of have that. And when folks get to go visit that and see that, what can they expect?
Well, we've had a variety of things go on there. We the full experience involves doing a mash of for whiskey, or I think we did brandy one time too, where we go through the whole process of heating the water, taking a wooden barrel, putting the mash recipe with the water, stirring it endlessly, letting it cool. We go through the beginning of fermentation. I think when we've done it over 2 days, you can really start to see the results of the fermentation. And while we have a still, we do not have a license to distill. And so we're demonstrating the process. So we show how condensation happens in the still, but it's water. I'm being brutally honest here. There may come a day when we can get the permits and when OSHA will let us run this as a going operation. But we've been fortunate that some of our partners in the distilling community, if you could call it that, have taken the mash and then distilled it. So we can say this was mashed at Locust Grove, even if it wasn't distilled at Locust Grove. So it's really about educating people about the process, and that this is a natural thing that went on a farm, just like dairying or baking or any of the other things that take raw materials and make them into food or drink for humans or animals. It's all part of the same ecosystem in a way. And so that's the full experience. And Brian has come and led that for us, brought some of his friends and associates, Spirits of French Lick, and other places have come and they've helped. We also show off the distillery in a program we have called Unfolding the Story, which is an interactive tour led by actors in the role of Alfred and Louisa, who are members of the enslaved community at Locust Grove. So the actors inhabit those roles and they show various parts of the property, including the distillery. So Alfred, who is in our telling of the story a distillery worker, can show the tools, explain the process, talk about how he learned it and so forth, but it's not an actual mash. And our whole process here was interrupted by COVID and by Brian's leaving. And so we've started working with some other possibilities for how we can do regular demos at the distillery. We've been working with Andrea Merriweather, who's worked a lot with the community, the bourbon community, on telling the stories of Black distilling, because there was a strong role for enslaved people in distilling, from creating some of the original products to doing the actual labor of stirring and mashing and distilling and so forth. So Andrea's got some interns coming, and we're hoping that can kind of kickstart the program anew. I'm talking too long, but whenever you come to Locust Grove, you can see the distillery. You just may not see it in action.
No, that is awesome. And Brian, what's it like to kind of see it come to life again from your perspective, where you got to learn it and kind of showcase it? Like you said, you guys can't go do the full thing. Unfortunately, those lovely liquor laws across America make things a little bit
And they
difficult.
are not designed for 18th century style establishments. They are
Some
not.
people didn't get the memo that prohibition ended.
Yeah.
It's just, for me, it's reliving a real part of the past, because when I'm down there doing it, nothing's for show, nothing's fake. We're doing it all real. We're not just putting grain in a barrel and so you see what grain in a barrel and water looks like. We're doing all the temperatures correctly. We're introducing everything at the right time. We're managing it correctly. And like Carol said, the neat thing is, when we've been doing this over the course of a couple of days, we haven't yeasted it, but it's a really good feeling when you get up in the morning, even after it's been cold out, and the wild yeast in the air has very actively started fermenting that mash, and then you did it right. That's the real feeling of victory.
And I don't know if you thought of this when we were setting up the distillery, Brian, but it's right near a grape arbor. And
It
so
is.
the yeast from the grapes may have helped us with the distilling process.
And that's consistent. When we've done it for real, like I say, even when it's been colder overnight, then I think it should have worked. Yeah, that yeast from the grapes presumably really kicks it off. And I would love to plan it one day to where we could really start the fermentation that way. It would be a risk, and then send it off and have it finished off. But like I say, that's got to be done at another facility. Kentucky Artisan Distillery was helping us out with that for a while. They're just up in Crestwood, Kentucky. Stephen Thompson, one of the founders who sadly passed on, he approached me about that at the opening. But they would come down, pump our mash out, take it up to their licensed facility, and finish it off. But the problem is, we can only practically do about 100 gallons of mash at a time. And that takes a small bit of equipment. And their operation grew enough that they had to get rid of the still that was small enough to process our stuff. So we're in between on that one. So congratulations to Kentucky Artisan, but yeah.
We should give a shout out to Brooks Grain too, which has donated the grain that we're using. Ideally, one day we'll grow our own and we'll be able to show what the heirloom varieties look like. We did try, but the combination of a massive storm and deer pressure has made it difficult. But we would like to do that. And we do have an orchard. So when that really gets in full flower, full fruit, maybe we can actually be distilling things that we grow completely on the property. That would be great to bring back early farming, because 18th and 19th century farming techniques were developed by people in Kentucky, indigenous and settlers. And so to be able to show the agricultural part of this as well is something we've been working on.
And brandy was a neat project. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I was gonna say, because people don't realize there were a lot of distilleries back in the day, but a lot more than there are now, even though it feels like it. And like you were gonna say, Brian, brandy was a big thing because of all the orchards that were around.
That was one of the neatest things we did. And Alan Bishop led us through that process, and he's a brandy distiller. That's the core of his kind of distilling identity. He's the master distiller of spirits of French Lick. But we got the apples from Evans Orchard in Georgetown, Kentucky. Just asked for 4 bushels of seconds, except Red Delicious. And Alan led us through mashing it just like it was done back then. Kentucky Artisan took it and distilled it for us with the solids in, just like it was done back then. And it was 120 proof spirit. And I just expected it to taste mostly like alcohol. But as it rolled over your tongue, it was the most beautiful pop of fruit flavor.
And Brian, we still have some of it. I found it in the liquor cabinet the other day.
Really?
Yes.
That's wonderful.
A little bit, like this much.
Gotcha.
Still have some.
Well, that's amazing. The bulk of it got misplaced.
Well, and not only is that the only thing you guys have going on there, you have some real cool events, some fun ones coming up. I know you're partnering with the Belle of Louisville for Locust Grove on the River. Can you talk about how that partnership came together from 2 historical entities?
Well, we're both city-owned properties, so there's been a natural intention to figure out ways to work together. But it came through theater, really, I think, because our museum theater director, Brandy Lachey, knows Casey Cole, who is the programmer on the Bell. In fact, Casey was one of the actresses who portrayed Louisa in our Unfolding the Story tours. So we have a strong bond with the University of Louisville's African American Theater program. And so Brandy and Casey, between them, cooked up the idea of a partnership. And we've already had one program, which was a combination lecture and performance about the emancipation story of the enslaved community at Locust Grove, who were freed before the Civil War by a complicated legal process. And so it's its own Juneteenth kind of story before Juneteenth even happened. So that's already happened. And we have another event coming up that I actually have a meeting right after this to start to pin down exactly what we're going to do.
Well, that's really cool. And another fun event is the 18th Century Market Fair. How much fun is that for y'all?
It is a time machine. It is amazing. It's a partnership with military reenactor groups who do Revolutionary War, not Civil War, Revolutionary War, and vendors and performers. And Brian ran it for years, so Brian probably should extol how wonderful it is.
Yeah, I'd been a participant before I was in charge of that side from the staff. It started back in 2004, which I think was your first year there, Carol.
Yes, its first year is my first year.
Yeah, and I was at every one, and I just remember even before I was on staff, wandering around one night and just kind of standing on the wall and looking over everything and thinking what a wonderful, magical thing it is that all these different people will come together and pool their resources to make this world live again for a weekend, and that's really what it is like. All the stuff. I think sometimes when people come through a reenactment like that, they think it's just props that the site set up, but that's not what it is. It's everybody's little piece coming together to make this world live. And for me, also, I love the fall and Halloween and all that, and have it be right at that time of year when the leaves are changing, there's a crisp in the air. There's just something extra transporting about that.
Yeah, the first time we had it, I walked out there early in the morning, and the reenactors are all camped there. So there are 18th century style tents, and they're cooking over open fires, and there's a little haze of smoke in the air, and so you smell it, you almost taste it. Everything just takes you back, and that's an experience you don't get very often. And the people are volunteers. They do this because they love it. They research the time period and the ways of cooking and the clothing, and it's a passion for them in a way that's really kind of inspiring.
Well, it's absolutely amazing to see, and you just talking about it, you can almost takes you right there to that time frame, and when folks come out to visit, what can they expect out there? Because like you said, we've got the Farm Distillery Project, you got other events, but like you said, there are other things that happen there quite often.
Well, it does. It varies by day and it varies by time of year. So I would recommend that people who are interested in coming take a look at our website and just see what intrigues them. And we just had a concert in our we have a fabulous new events pavilion. It's beautiful, so that we can do outdoor events even when it rains, which was a big consideration. But we just had two concerts. One was a chamber music concert where you could hear music of the time period performed with instruments of the period, and that was lovely. We had a great crowd for that. And then just a few days later, we had the Commonwealth Brass Band, and we had a concert of pops, of show tunes and popular music. We had an even bigger crowd for that. So we do things like that. It took us literally 2 years to replace Brian, but we now have a program director again, who is working on a variety of programs that we had to drop for not having staff, like workshops, craft workshops, and so forth. And if you come on an ordinary Thursday, you can see our exhibit gallery and watch our film and have a self-guided tour of the grounds and a guided tour of the historic house. You can look at the outbuildings and the distillery. And so that exists all Tuesday through Saturday. And but we do have special programs different times of the year. We also do a used book sale, which has been an important source of revenue, but also gets people on the site. So even if they're not ready to take a tour or participate in a program, then they at least know how to drive to Locust Grove. So there's a whole variety of things. We have a summer camp going on right now, which again is a partnership with a theater company, looking for Lilith Theater Company, does a camp here. And depends on the day.
And I guess this will be for Brian to kind of wrap things up. Since you've been there, been part of so many different things, why should folks come out and check it out?
I think because there's a little bit of something for everybody, even if for whatever side of history you have an interest in, whether it's the Revolutionary War, whether it's historic trades, whether it's architecture, farming, there's a little bit of something for everybody on there that you could kind of pick out and accentuate. Even if you're not a history person at all, the 55 acres are absolutely gorgeous. There are trails back in the woods that, when I was trying to solve a problem or something, I would just kind of wander around back there to try to come up with a solution, but even from that aspect, if you're a nature lover, you just want a pretty place to go away from the hustle and bustle of the city. And
Pollinator Meadow, we're still trying to get really established, but native plants and grasses and flowers and formal gardens.
Well, from a volunteer standpoint as well, it's like Locust Grove has a vibrant community, and that's one thing I've watched over the years is beyond the history of the place. It's actually a living, breathing, active community. It's very important to people now. It was a support network for me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's an amazing place.
It's people.
And it's people that can share stories that other folks may not always realize that existed here in Louisville and in Kentucky. And Carol and Brian, thank you for sharing that history with us. And whether that was just the Farm Distillery Project, which I know a lot of people should check out to see where everything kind of started for this industry that is home here in Kentucky, to just everything else that has happened there.
Well, thank you for having us on. This has been a blast.
Thank you.
Find more from Hops and Spirits at hopspirits.com.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.